Porpoising has been the first word out of Toto Wolff's mouth during interviews this year. A talk with the FIA president recently has given the Mercedes team principal more ammunition for getting changes made. Toto was over the moon when the FIA said they were going to try and change the regulations for 2023 to eliminate porpoising, the side effect of which would have helped Mercedes. Want to know what his new angle of attack is and what the other teams think? Then stick around while we get you filled in. At this point, we all know what porpoising is. The side effect of the new ground effect floors has been incredibly punishing for the drivers and has been the center of race weekend conversations all year. Toto Wolff and his Mercedes drivers Lewis Hamilton and George Russell have been begging for rule changes all season to help them address the problem in their car. A big part of the problem for the Silver Arrows seems to be in their car design. They chose the no-pod side-pod concept, thinking that they would be able to run their car incredibly low to the track. During simulations, porpoising didn't show up as a problem, but once they got to the racetrack, it very obviously was. Why it has affected Mercedes more than any other team, we don't know. If we did, we'd be earning six figures working as a chief designer at the team. Mercedes spent pretty much the entire season so far trying to solve the problem, and seem to have finally started getting to the bottom of it. The problem is that they've had to make a large number of changes, which seem to have been suboptimal in terms of performance gain. Obviously, we don't know how fast they could have been if the porpoising wasn't a problem, but the fact that they aren't bouncing anymore and are still pleading for changes makes us think they believe there is more speed in their car if they can develop in a way that is currently illegal. Recently, it seemed that Mercedes' prayers may have been answered, as the FIA released a technical directive that was aimed at forcing the teams to set up their cars in such a way that the porpoising would be less severe on the drivers. Following a back-breaking Azerbaijan Grand Prix, a race in which every driver except Fernando Alonso was said to have complained about porpoising, the FIA made the call to intervene in the interest of safety. A technical directive was issued laying out two measures that the FIA would be taking: closer scrutiny of the planks and skids, both in terms of their design and the observed wear, and the definition of a metric based on the car's vertical acceleration that will give a quantitative limit for the acceptable level of vertical oscillations. The exact mathematical formula for this metric is still being analysed by the FIA, and the Formula 1 teams have been invited to contribute to this process. These new tests can be put in place by the FIA relatively easily, and will come into play at the Belgian Grand Prix weekend after the summer break. Despite this though, Mercedes still weren't happy. Toto and the boys wanted more from the FIA. They continued to complain, and eventually the FIA caved and said they would be recommending changes to the rules for 2023. The FIA outlined, following input from the teams, changes to the technical regulations for 2023. If you haven't already guessed, that input apparently came almost solely from Mercedes. These are a 25mm raising of the floor edges, a raising of the underfloor diffuser throat, the introduction of a more stringent lateral floor deflection test, and the use of a more accurate sensor to quantify aerodynamic oscillation. These changes cannot just be implemented though. They need to make it through the FIA's World Motorsport Council first, and they will take input from the whole grid, not just Mercedes. There have been a huge amount of complaints from many teams, and we'll talk about that because it is shocking. But first, let's look at the information Toto Wolff is now using to try and force these changes through. After a recent chat with the FIA president Mohammed Ben Sulayem, Toto Wolff has found more ammunition to help these changes get pushed through. Wolff suggested that a medical report he was shown in the meeting at the Hungaroring on Saturday was all the evidence he needed to be sure there should be no watering down of the approach. There's all this talk of lobbying in either direction, but I think fundamentally, what are we talking about, he said. The FIA has commissioned medical work on the porpoising. The summary of the doctors is that the frequency of 1 to 2 Hz, sustained over a few minutes, can lead to brain damage. We have 6 to 7 Hz over several hours. So the answer is very easy: the FIA needs to do something about it. There has been a growing pool of research in elite-level sport over the last 10 years into the effects of head injury on the long-term health of athletes' brains, and a quick summary is that banging your head is really, really bad if you do it on a regular basis. The research has led to class action lawsuits in multiple countries across multiple sports, so this is something that Formula 1 needs to take very seriously. Wolff might be using this medical report he has seen as new ammunition to try and force through changes, but not everyone is convinced that he's crusading for the good of the drivers. In fact, most of the team bosses believe he is just thinking about his team's lap times. 6 teams have reportedly rejected the rule changes for the 2023 season already. And you might know a few of them because they haven't been shy about coming out and saying they think it's rubbish. Current championship rivals Ferrari and Red Bull will get the most media attention as they are 2 of the biggest teams in the sport, but supporting them in objection is Haas, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri and the Williams team. Red Bull team principal Christian Horner had a not very sly dig at Mercedes, saying the rules are being changed for one team. A significant rule change is being pushed through so that one team can make their car lower and benefit from their concept. Of course, where Horner complains, so does his advisor at Red Bull, Dr. Helmut Marko. He was even less sly with his statement and has been more vocal about the rule changes and strongly disapproved that no rule changes should be made for a single team. Speaking to the media, Marko said, "The teams that voted for it are McLaren, Aston Martin and Mercedes. Funnily enough, all teams with Mercedes engines. Is that a coincidence?" he quizzed sarcastically. Like we said before though, it isn't just Red Bull who've been vocal about the new rules. Ferrari team boss Mattia Binotto managed to stay on the side of subtlety with his arguments against change. In his opinion, the new checks the FIA will be doing after the summer will be enough to stop porpoising being a problem in the future. There is no reason to look at this as a safety problem, because most teams have the bouncing under control now. And from Spa, there are fixed limits anyway. So if the cars comply with the specifications, they should be safe. And if there is no safety arrangement, the normal voting process must be followed when the rules are changed. AlphaTauri team principal Franz Tost has also issued a pointed statement slating the proposed F1 regulation changes for next season. Expressing his opinion, Tost said, "The latest discussions and proposals for changing of the floor, in my opinion, it is nothing to do with safety, it is just politics." It is hard to see how the FIA will get this rule change through for 2023 when so many teams have been so vocal in objection to it. Part of the problem for the FIA and the basis of many arguments against the changes is how late in the season it is to be changing regulations for next year. The teams are already well into their development cycles for next year. Chassis have been designed, testing and development have been ongoing for months, and millions of dollars have been spent. The smaller teams literally cannot afford a rule change this late in the year. We've read some reports that changes might mean an entirely new chassis is required for 2023, and that is a luxury that many teams cannot afford. While the changes are being disputed by some teams, in the name of impartiality, we should highlight the arguments of the teams in support of Mercedes. McLaren's team principal Andreas Seidel gave his team support to the FIA's stance. "We're happy with the decisions from the FIA side or the leadership from the FIA's side regarding that topic," he told media at Paul Ricard. "When all this started regarding the TD, the FIA made it clear that it is based on safety. That's why I think it's also very important now to follow through and not give way in any direction. So we're very happy with that." Seidel was quick to say that his team had not been lobbied by its rivals to oppose the rules change. "We're an independent team and we make up our own minds and fight for what we think is correct," he said. "We are supportive of the lead here from the FIA. It's still an ongoing discussion, which is also normal. But in the end, I guess we'll have clarity soon and then just focus on that. Go ahead." The FIA will need to make a decision either way soon, because the later in the season it gets, the worse the implementation would be for the teams. At this point, it is hard to see a way for Mercedes and the FIA to force through this change, because so many of the teams are against it. The paddock is already complaining of FIA favoritism towards Mercedes, and if this rule goes through, that discontent may start to boil over. Do you think the FIA are favouring Mercedes with their decision making? And will the new tests in Belgium solve the problem, or do the car design rules need fundamental changes like the ones the FIA is recommending? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.